kid makes fun of me for it, but it's
for switching colors.
Yeah.
See, the problem was what I would do is sometimes I'll start writing answers next to people as they do make them, and I started writing them in the same color.
I have to.
Seems like you're approximate.
Like my brain is just like
screaming into it.
I like close-ups.
I don't. So
Talking to them.
I don't know if we need that. Darius, I'm just gonna like put papers over here.
Oh, yeah, you can do whatever.
Yeah.
You'll know it's
Clede's still in the bathroom.
well, sorry, Clede.
Actually, I'm gonna sit right here.
This is already our second D3 debate.
Shout out to my mama.
Shout out to 337.
Shout out to the 318. You know my brother out there. You know what I'm saying. We got our whole family out there. Throw your fours out, throw your ones out for the New Orleans. 504. You got the 225. You got the 337. All of y'all out there, y'all chilling. Shit. You know, you got Mississippi. Shout out to Mississippi. You know what I'm saying. But yeah, we getting it in.
Shout out to the 504.
Yeah, you know. Shout out to Nico Mama.
Shout out to Sonia Renard, Alfredo Juarez,
Exactly.
Gabriel Juarez. Shout out to Rachel Hurtado, holding it down.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Shout out to Brittany Plans. You know.
Shout out to the whole OU squad.
Yeah, they out there. Shout out to Dr. Lupe. You know, we got George in the building. Shout out to this UCO squad. You know, about to get done.
Let's get it.
Let's go. Let's go.
Clede, Chad, Marquise. All good. Alright, glad you're all in one spot. This makes it very convenient.
Fix my hair.
That look good.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna be looking at the stream while I'm looking at myself.
Dang. Alright, good. Current research practices surrounding climate change and indigenous peoples is centered around the dichotomy of resilience and vulnerability. Indigenous populations are either nobly resilient in the face of dire threats or helplessly vulnerable in need of another field's governmental intervention. These homogenous narratives stem from settler research projects that cannot be disentangled from the process of colonization itself. Cameron, in 12 appear to believe how neutral change procedures and political powers which indigenous resistance fees and human dimension climate change feel have been a lens through which life many people into climate change obviously use the scholars and policy makers time to critically examine this opportunity for advising the turn protection knowledge of colonize people to face shame and implicate policy helping the diversity to raise and interest in the fears and concern knowledge inherent in traditional knowledge production that is related policy and political discourse and political research. The organization of the politically updated for research for breaking colonial subject knowledge and practices they rendering climate change field technical intervention including environmental political content with the ordinary people struggle to respond to climate change and local world based climate change and intervention that is indigenous or their current climate change has a neutral the process of being a colonial formation we position people to pose against for all that people who feel like it's colonial now that indigenous people who feel not colonial history will play away interventions that list justify their urging to perceive or take rationalized forces displacement. The point that really action on climate change but take action addresses the concerns that have been repeatedly identified by northerners and indigenous people are neither simply passive victims or virtuous warriors through climate change and land theft. Dispossession is not limited to the earth. It's an extension of extractive research that is taken without consent by scientists and academics who then wage extraction on indigenous bodies, lands, and reproduction because native life is the ultimate threat to settler future. Simpson and Klein 13. There was never a time when was listening that literally six part of the way her circle can never pressure protect land culture and nature languages and hypertraction natural resources land and tracks is not just mining intellects and minds attraction so much you go to get by the land resource and culture not resource like bodies resource children are research because their potential to help with attraction assimilation system colonialism has always extracted just knowledge from many peoples. The extracted mind sometimes about how we try to bring indigenous knowledge in terms of indigenous people. It's about extracting whatever side of the environmental power good and assimilating it in settler states require this extractive relationship to territory and bodies to define themselves. That this dispossession is formed by living and dead native women who are rendered rapeable and extractable because they signify the possibility of native futures that are incommensurable with reconciliation. Simpson and 16 conservative governments require extractive relations, territorial hostile change, right to extract land and kill land. All settler colonial regimes have territory reduced all land into the body. Settler regimes signifying the political force and self-danger, possibly reproducing any life, other sovereignties, and political will of one's bodies are likely highly will be attracted for something that's already by little valid and great march to accumulate surplus and dispossession of race and gender. Its violence is horrible, intended corporalities for corporalizing women, their bodies haven't rendered less valuable because of what they represent: land, reproduction, indigenous kindred, governors, health, high pressure, corporeals, their lives are shorter, they are poor, less educated, sicker, more frequently, and they are disappear. The language should not be reconciliation because its historical violence, colonialism is not over, it's ongoing, and sovereignty is not merely a call for land return or respect for treaty rights, but a particular embodiment of refusal. Teresa Spence, a former chief of the Hattaway-Pisgah First Nation, announced that she would not eat until the Prime Minister of Canada met with her to discuss the conditions of Indigenous peoples in the North. She declared her body as a sign of sovereignty and refusal, lasting weeks, surviving only on fluids, defying what she is required to do as an Indian woman, which is to die. Simpson is 16. Spence announced she would not stop eating the Prime Minister and Governor General met with her to discuss the deplorable conditions of immunity and the conditions in the North of respect for her action and sovereignty. Other people stop eating solitary. Spence appearance, her fleshy appearance with set hour commentators, her excess flesh divides the logic of genocide because what she required without starvation is to die with the legal passing out, was the casting out possibly translates out of the shoaling loss of the discovered because of all bodies were more than just flesh. They were besides the system symbols to be fact and applicable life, so they had to be killed. So the technique of elimination is legal Indian acts render anyone pension property of their husband. If anyone married out, they were disputed white center law body politic. They moved to patchily picture war government change race legal femicide off of bodies of political form of women's political form that you correspond to the instrument of Indians legal death redivision and subject by sovereignty that makes Teresa Spence a chief to correct her body side renouncing leaving sovereignty decided a decision not to her action became peaceful. I don't know more taking form that actions by laws are in its public spaces for a blockage. I don't know more take exception to the fundamental issues of consent. The movement joint forces those who want to enter tax and direction between the land like a dead body to be extracted from in a world of extraction and increased resistance. Settler states use tools of recognition and reconciliation to assimilate indigenous nations through the promise of redemption. This necessitates a commitment to a mode of refusal that negates the authority of the settler colonial nation state and refuses the possibility of compromise with settler notions of sovereignty. Day in 15. This is out of politics legitimizing indigenous nations state recognition rather than one refusal to recognize those interpolated by settler colonial nation state that no more the indigenous sovereignty in Canada blockades and stabilize the production natural resources of the global markets are to extraction blockades and European blocks of resources currently being transferred into international markets are fully located dispossessing indigenous nations and modes of extraction negative impact on the economic infrastructure, core political communication, capital, settler global political economies, the taxes report of a cartography for negates authority of the state, the possible of the blockade movement, the struggle for franchise and no wartime conflict is a struggle against the free of settler colonial capitalism. The 1AC is a refusal of reconciliation and dispossession of extractive research and settler narratives of indigenous resistance within climate change. Refusal is always particular and operates as a mode and framework for desire-based research in both academic and non-academic spaces. Instead of consuming white savior climate narratives which consolidate settler innocence, refusal turns settlerism into an object of research which denaturalizes its totalizing Western structure. Tuck and Yang in 14 refusal practice houses spectators with new bodies who are trained free injuries, scars, and field shifts. The case in violent body and violating insurance refusal moves also thinking violence as an enter analysis of it as a structure. Refusal to need for narratives, image rising social science, a term research like healing, legal, and circulating fruits on prohibition, which gender for refusal to translate back by power, colon modalities, and person's body differentially counted by latest state to go back to work and make transparent the manner and production and temperature pain and documenting ruling of the racial difference. Refusal made meaningful of ground and critique of settler colonial rights, routine representation, field generates Spain, champions, reputational territories that colonial knowledge and never settle and disclose and domesticate. This is the final point. Refusal protects and compensate factor diary, chronology, settler colonial knowledge, refusal of particular ground and historical analysis and present condition researcher might make transparent colonial academic knowledge in order to find ethical limits and limits on knowledge and expand decolonial representation of territories. Desire mode refusal to refuse the master narrative. The colonization was inevitable. It deploys social science, turned back out itself as other colonial knowledge as opposed to universal liberal neutral knowledge as long as the objects of research presumably damaged communities and need intervention. The medical social science research remains unchallenged from being self-employed. The object research may be to halt the machinery that knowledge facilitate evictions on indigenous and black life. Therefore, refusal by to leverage a resource academy against this to expand the representational territories fought by communities working to toward settler colonialism. Debate is a site of research. It is not insulated from the colonial academy that attempts to use the same techniques of recognition and assimilation with indigenous scholarship. Knowledge produced by native academics and debaters remains peripheral and homogenous, solely defined under settlerism's terms. Indigeneity is always in tension with academic research, but relegating indigenous scholars to either outside the academy or to a particular form of presentations creates epistemic violence by wedding them to a singular idea of what indigeneity is. Refusal and debate and within the topic is something which continuously centers criticism within structures of power and knowledge production. Hunt 13. Making ontological shifts in the strategy of knowledge, whether logical and disciplinary practices, was having to know indigeneity, what representation strategies used, engaging with indigenous ontologies, moving from rural community university class and their conference, precise ceremony, was a presentation of simultaneous ceremonial education, no choice to cross borders, speaking ties, the rights of race of indigenous scholars, both fields and possibly girls, both at the same time. That navigation, indigenous, academic worlds, and political tension, raising with power measures, indigenous research, and sovereignty, and global recognition, beyond hedgehog protection, social information, and First Nation soft divide, validation of the rights of the shift of building policy, the English assimilation, and representation, representation, economic requires indigenous people to identify properly individual forms like racist reforms of recognition, surgery for the domination of colonial power. Indigenous sovereignty can only be changed in self-refraction, we break the inclusion of indigenous knowledge in the dominant institutions, private conferences, by leaders assume given the need of academic papers and limit time limited presentation. Indigeneity is not just indigenous, also live practice and relational. The heterogeneous voices can become lost in efforts to understand indigeneity, ways of fixing indigenous knowledge, indigenous conferences remain peripheral knowledge, production, dominance, issues, different conferences, such as involved, and epistemic violence, assembly, the dose for humanization, producing the effects of rather those limitations for establishing limiting intelligibility process of colonialism North America off representational strategies to transform Indigenous people and their lands conceptually materially facilitate the space planning rather than less than human high cultural position conceptual the violence oppression Indigenous people vitality sovereignty space strategy future Indigenous rights and political strategies depend on the ability of Indigenous knowledge to produce active multilateral nature rather than fixity of given colonial law. We told the king they were going to strict one of the opposed ideological boundaries which stereotype as past tense people. This means that anthropology and academic production must refuse extractive scholarship that attempts to map universal assumptions onto Indigenous resistance against dispossession. Spice in 16. Since the first colonial football Turtle Island people have resisted the 7 counts of right people resisting and forced to right ideas of anthropology and U.S. urban engagement with these land advancements anthropology, scientific anthropology, social arts, legal organization, cultural practices. Indigenous people were always under attack by sibling force. Indigenous people were portrayed as culture, virgin, extinction, device, reference, resistance, racial assimilation. It is now Indigenous communities were fighting for survival. Indigenous lives, cultural practice, we need ethical reference to advance academic careers, but the discipline has a renewed opportunity to honor the contribution of Indigenous scholars and Indigenous communities across the continent, third by state sponsored extractive activities. Anthropology cannot mirror this with extractive scholarship. They fight against apples by refusal to disappear as Indigenous people. The right to say no to the pipeline, no to the poison, no to the vacuums, political theory, reconciliation, no to anthropological study, representations of noble savages still pervade the environmentalists, contaminated people. The ivory tower is also belongs to land, Welsh child slavery, the LC Sacramento not, and engages some transitory parsimony. Neither nothing was recently about Oka, Wujini, Alcatraz, Gus, and the Lake, Elp, Stock, Peace River Valley, Oak Flag, Copenhagen, Lime, Monarchia, Roscraft Falls.
Good.
Yeah, 1 second.
Cool.
Go for it.
Okay, so I guess my first question right off the top is, what makes you native?
I'm
Sure, but like in general, what makes somebody native?
Yeah, so having a relationship to indigeneity means a lot of different things for different people. In terms of
but the way that your Simpson evidence is kind of characterizing indigeneity seems to kind of place people within specific positions. In fact, it cites that Native women, right, seem to have particularly high rates of rape, right,
yeah,
and things like that.
About
so what does it mean to be structurally within that position?
So if you're an indigenous woman, as Simpson is describing, it means that you're in a position of being extractable and rapeable based on sort of like legal.
Yeah, but I know that. But my question is, what is it? How do we know who that is, right? Like, is Andrea Smith that?
God, no.
Okay, but a lot of people thought that she was Native for a long time.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know why the F has to defend.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to defend that like she is or is not Native.
Okay.
My question is, why when people believed that she was Native, and when people believed that she was Native, was she in the category of being Native?
Huh?
When people believe
she's
that
not indigenous. She's a liar.
Oh. Yes.
So that is that's our response to that argument.
So
I don't know why
did she face violence for being indigenous?
Because
when people believed her to be indigenous is my question.
No, because she's not indigenous.
Oh. Okay.
I'm confused on your
move on.
No, that's okay. Cool.
She's not
My
indigenous.
next question is the affirmative obviously outlines a series of harms, right? Extractivism is one, clearly genocide, the gendered violence against Native women. Obviously, right, we're not going to say that those things are, good, but my question is, what makes them bad? How do we know that those things are bad?
Sorry, what? Is that your question?
Yeah, it's just like, how do we, obviously those things are bad, how do we know that they're bad?
Your argument obviously kind of comes back to like a value question. We know they're bad because they are sort of targeted about differential bodies. So the Simpson evidence sort of discusses how indigenous women are in a particular relationship towards like legal elimination or like legal femicide.
Sure, so why is that bad?
Huh? Why is it bad for indigenous women to be
I'm just asking, how do you know that those things are bad? Like,
I
clearly
know that
I would say they're bad. How do you know that they're bad?
I know that it's bad for indigenous women to be raped because it's intrinsically bad for that to happen because
it's intrinsically bad.
It's intrinsically bad because of we consider things like consent. I don't think I should have to give much more explanation unless you want to clarify what your question actually means.
My question is like, how do we understand why impacts matter in the affirmative? Like, I just want to know, how do I weigh impacts of the affirmative? That's what
obviously weighing impacts in the debate that we're going to have is going to be pretty hard, which is why whenever you make an impact, we will obviously answer it. It's hard for me to answer a question.
How did the judge
based on
how does the judge vote
yet.
affirmative if you can't give a reason?
I just gave a reason. I think it's intrinsically bad that indigenous women are rendered as rapeable.
I have a question. Your piece of Spice evidence talks about the politics of recognition.
Yeah,
I guess
we say those are bad.
Yes, right. So then why vote F?
Huh? Well, the ballot isn't just like recognition of us as people. It's not recognition.
Is it not?
Recognition is in terms of legalism and things of like recognizing with the settler nation state.
This does not say that.
It does though.
I'm reading it.
We're good. I need prep. My suggestion would be to flow it right next to case.
Yeah.
No, don't. Just go through it. suffering that they have.
Yeah.
Let's see, what page am I on? 44.
Yeah, the pages are like.
I appreciate the page numbers. They are incredibly helpful.
Well, it's like they don't go from 1 to X. It's
Yeah,
it starts at like
that's okay.
20.
I'm waiting on my shit to just download. Alright. Fuck. Sorry, my computer's just slow, I promise. Alright. Let me get a view on 150 real quick, because I can't see. Alright. Y'all ready? Alright.
In an interview with Sean Hannity, George Zimmerman proclaimed that the shooting of Trayvon Martin was God's will. If so, then God considers Black death a moral imperative and act of righteousness that Zimmerman performed as a obedient disciple. The irrationality of anti-Black violence spawned over who knows when of gratuitous violence begs the question, is God a white racist? Affirmation of the question is no less a legitimate answer to the question of irrational Black death and whether the greatest critical race theories have written. In fact, for many, the answer is simply that we don't know why this violence happens. We may never know. Thus, we begin our investigation of the world with a thought process that asks, how do we live in a world where God is a white racist, brown no day? Is God a white racist, divine racist, and suffers from a specific type of suffering, ethnic suffering, and joined with a particular interpretation of God's sovereignty over human history and activity with human history, or both ethnic suffering has no essential value for man's salvation or well-being and leads away from the highest good. In fact, every apologetic approach to human suffering at the same time builds a conclusion about the cause or origin of that suffering. And maybe this thought process is so ridiculous, all it becomes impossible to imagine a world without Black suffering, or a world that doesn't need Black suffering. The logical, the political, linear temporality, biopolitical futurity, perfection, and betterment and redress has only sustained Black suffering from shitty amendment to meaningless laws. Black bodies have died along the way. Every dead Black body is an indictment of the political indictment, which asks how many more have to die before we give up. That's Warner 15. The first juxtaposition structural relations to political Black humanity becomes imaginary number, purely spectacle in 1930, but difficult to actualize into something tangible. Supposedly the generation of the murder Trayvon Martin, Shimi Biden was rather than the generation of the murder image of Black suffering instrumentalized to accomplish pedagogical, authentic, and redemptive objective. Black suffering and death become the premium vehicles of political perfection, social maturation, the logical, the political lineage, imperiality, biopolitical futurity, perfection, betterment, and redress, sustained Black suffering in every course of the political and its discourse whole ultimately reproduce the very metaphysical structure of violence that pulverized Black being. This essay considers Black nihilism a necessary philosophical posture capable of around the political and its devastating logical political. Black nihilism resist an story rhetoric that assumes it's possible to pursue political anti-Black violence and advance political policy, the only ethical response to Black suffering. And the question will go becomes, can we be partial atheists? Can we reject this racist God, still participate in the social order? The logic of struggle rebels in the fact that in the face of the divine racism, claiming to get there one day while ignoring the demand for the evidence of the efficacy of the struggle. The logical struggle perpetuates Black suffering by placing relief in an unattainable future. A future often nothing more than this for reproduction, no means of existence. That's War 15. This struggle contains the promise to overcome anti-Black social not yet so short. The trick time is employed to protect struggle from the rigorous historical analysis of the demand evidence of fake the not yet so short situated in approachable future can only promise this overcome against the history and ferocity of a brutal anti-Black social organization. If the political itself is the temple of this God, can we discard the idol, purify the temple, can we reject the racist God, support the political structure that affirms this idol? Can we be part of the atheist? The problem is that it relies on the political, the spirit of redemption, and hope when the political is part of the idolist structure and seeks to dismantle the political and anti-Black and conceptual mutual with the utopian vision of not yet so short that purges anti-Black from its core, provides a promise without relief. It's only answer to the immediacy of Black suffering to keep struggling. The logical struggle perpetuates Black suffering by placing relief on unattainable future. A future also nothing more than exploitative reproduction of its own meaning. This is struggle, action, work, and labor are called in political metaphysics that depend on Black death. And the clock of the church tied forward is bell, echoing the death of the slave in his gears, ordered in blood. That's Merlot 16. Even though the captive have been liberated, the ruling epistemology remain grounded in the originary metaphors accumulated captivity and mutilation, so neither time nor history nor historiography and its topic show movement that the human subject is murdered over and over again. So that implies a causal link in the symbolic order outright determines the movement of time for Blacks in relation to Black and Black flesh becomes a kind of black hole warping time and space disfiguring it. The time does not show movement, appears to stall, but rather is a series of repetition over and over again. So loops and looping and stalling murders Blacks, human subjectivity, time kills any dimension of ethic. Time appears to act as the first murdering Blackness in relation to humanity. This document or static depends on the impossible application, generalized equilibrium, disequilibrium, equilibrium, restore narrative progression to Blackness and narrative become antagonistic to each other. The latter is impossible ability for the former, reaffirm the former's violent subjugation. The problem with humanity to presume that time is linear progression. They can read anything else that's antagonist to Blackness. We must face this problem, consider these questions more deeply. And the church has an Eve as well, but her name is Vidya. She was violated by God. A violation wasn't a moment, but the condition of her being, the birth in the world. That's James 13. Flights from captivity into communal and conceptual wilderness created the maroon philosopher's habitat. The boundary of democracy, Afro-realism recognized the two contemporary phenomena: democracy as a boundary, defining freedom through captivity, and maroon philosophy as the borders, reimagining freedom through flight, reproductivity point to the Black majors, the cipher, symbolic and material subjugation that birth of maroon. Racial capital overshadows racial race, the seeming erasure of gender, the differences, masculine, Black suffering, folding of the Black female trauma into the Black male frame, death row, mass imprisonment, and stopping Christian norms centered on the violence of the public, and the public racial rape is complicated and immersion. Although all blood trails are traceable to the Black matrix, Focus on the nature of the subjectors and extent of reach into the interior spaces, colonization, sacrification of black wolves, and major cities have no public record. The black measures offer the deniability of the state and inmate violence where terrorists meet Western democracies manufacture the black bases disposal through libidinal, linguistic, and material economy. Civilians are the primary target for the terror against black female matrices and children. The DNA of police, military, master, and mistress, races, hardworking immigrants, and Catholics and Maroons all can be found in the bodies of black matrix transform, politicized black mother transform tragedy into a breach in democracy. And the holy text of the church proclaims that in decolonization they shall hunger no more, neither thirst anymore, neither shall the sun light on them, nor heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them and shall lead them unto living fountains of water, and God shall wipe away for all tears from their eyes. Yet heaven finds itself only in disavowing hell. That's section 14. From indigenous perspective, black struggle will need the layman loss of indigeneity, that slavery and the structure difference between settler colonialism and enslavement, the latter denial of the knowledge of who their nations are, the loss of indigeneity to be named, and its recovery pursued. The loss of indigeneity for black people can be acknowledged only abstractly. This recovery is loss of history. Something else must be essential to the political mobilization, not the dialectics of loss and recovery, rather the loss of dialectics of loss and recovery. As such, the politics forged from nowhere, no one in particular, from indigenous perspective, this basis of politics can only ever be a liability colonization, not necessary condition of enslavement, because one, slaves do not be colonial subjects and they do not face a fundamental directive of colonialism, and two, slaves cannot be settler colonial subjects or objects of settler colonial genocide. What can be done to the captive body? Anything whatsoever. The loss of sovereignty is a fait accompli. Genocide is an epidemic to slavery insofar as slavery banned the reproduction of enslaved people as peoples. Native studies scholars misrecognize the true horror of slavery as deculturalization, the loss of sovereignty, because they do not ask what slavery is in the basic most sense. Perhaps they do not want to know anything about it as they evaluate through the lens of their own law and layman in redress of the promise of their own political imagination. Slavery is not a loss that experience, that the self-experience of language, lineage, land, or labor, but the loss of any self that experience such loss, any positive based in research and recovery is bound in regards to the slave at the position of the unthought, the claim of native sovereignty for the size and interior lack of America. At this point is not mitigated by the fact that native sovereignty is quantifiably different from the sovereignty of nature state, with lengthy statement discursively at the ethical, ontological, epistemological point of contact at every scale. They can be both practice, cartography, their respective magnets. It's never in question. Capacity, coherence makes me more than a likely commitment to preserve the constituent elements of sovereignty in a pursuit of the concept of freedom as self-determination. The struggle for abolition is already necessary for the struggle for the promise of communism, decolonization, settler decolonization, slavery, the threshold of the political war, abolition, the interminable radicalization. Every radical moment slavery precedes and prepares the way for colonialism. Colonialism, the issue of their era, slavery, and politics. Abolition can never finally be a positive research and recovery, recuperation, abolition, and interminable radicalization. Every radical moment, but a radicalization through the perverse affirmation of de-racialization and uprooting of the natal nation, and the notion of preventing any order determination from taking root in politics without claim, without demanding even a politics whose demand is too radical to be formulated in advance of its deeds. You can market it deeds, and it's not simply this world that is anti-black, with the desire for a world that is anti-black. The eradication of black suffering will require the end of the world, but this is a world where this end will not yield a new world of possibilities for reorganization, black emancipation, denial of solution, destroy the field of all possible solutions. That's Warren 15. Anti-blacks in the direction that makes it impossible to destroy metaphysics, complete black emancipation will not yield a new world of possibility for reorganization. Black emancipation is not a solution to destroy the field of all possible solutions. In this sense, black emancipation becomes something like the death of the world. And now here we are at the end of approaching 9 minutes at the one to see the glaring question still remains. What was the point? Maybe the point there was no point. Maybe the point was trying to pretend like debate could be anything political or could be anything political, that we can do anything without forsaking black bodies. The point was not anything affirmative. In fact, it was anti-affirmative, pure negation that doesn't actually judge whether or not the affirmative is a good idea, but instead it asks you to realize the absurdity and jumping at all. What rubric of evaluation system, what value system, what existential reason, what policies of recognition exist that is not anti-black in the world, that was ruled by a white racist God in the world, where a white racist God has to go as an explanation for anti-blacks and saying the world simply needs anti-blacks to think, act, and exist temporally in space. And we think the answer that there isn't one. We think the only response is self-excommunicate, walk away, and refuse to evaluate the affirmative all recognize it. That's Warren 15. The politics of reverse metaphysical structure that sustain black self-interest preservation amounts to an exploitation of hope when the political colonizer spiritual concept of hope puts into the service extending the will to power of an anti-black organization of existence. The will, the politics of hope is bound up in metaphysical violence, violence masquerades solution to the problem of anti-black, temporal linearity, perfection, veteran struggle, work, and utopian futurity are conceptual instruments of the political that never operate black suffering, anti-black. All these concepts only serve to reproduce the conditions that render existence unbearable for black offspring, avoid the immediacy of black suffering, the horror, anti-black pulverization, and place relief in it. Not yet, but it is maybe to come social order that itself can do little. That itself can do little but admonish blacks to survive, to keep struggling. The black offspring prefer to collect the Jewish answers and answer to black suffering, find the victory, find the joy in toil, the victory and struggle, find the joy in struggle, the victory in toil, the satisfaction in faith. Actually, we continue to struggle and work as black youth slaughter day. These conditions are deep metaphysical problems, discipline, metaphysical domination, and work and struggle or avoid the terrifying fact that the world depends on black to sustain itself. Black now let's attempt to break this drive. You can market a drive.
Are you ready?
Does anybody have any water? My mouth dry as a motherfucker.
Ready?
Shit, I gotta start sleep. You go ahead, Nico, go ask the question.
Alright.
Cause I'm thirsty at the moment.
Alright, what is the metaphysical distinction between anti-black violence and settler colonialism?
Sure, so I think the first is that we're going to isolate the Simpson evidence and is citing Patrick Wolf that settler colonialism's irreducible element is territoriality. We think that operates within a dialectics of gains and losses.
Hold on, just to make sure.
Do I need to read the card because I have it?
No, I don't. I don't need you to do that. So because our Simpson evidence is citing Wolf, who makes an argument about settlerism sort of like being a structure, that is your link argument?
I mean, no,
No,
that's not
your
just
argument was asking what is the metaphysics of difference between anti-blackness and
Yes.
settler colonialism.
So as per-
My response is
you're
that
right.
settler colonialism operates within a dialectics of gains and losses that is not the same as the loss of the dialectic of gains and losses that the slave experiences.
Why is that a link argument?
I mean,
and not
well-
just like a distinction between like two like distinct
No, rather a
academic
piece of
structures?
sex evidence talks about
Okay.
when one is trying to refuse or forms of decolonization occur, it always leaves the slave in the position of
Wait,
the untaught.
where do you think the act
Right.
like called for decolonization?
Right?
I don't
Our,
think we're
well,
doing
I mean, we can look at your
I
specific
mean,
pieces
right
of
here I
evidence.
have the Tuck and Yang evidence
Yes.
that
it says refusal is something that is useful. It doesn't.
Yes,
No,
but,
hold on.
yes, but rather that I think that there's an advocacy statement that is stated by the affirmative, but I
Says
think
that
that
they
I think
don't
that
think-
rather that you should actually look at your pieces of evidence and actually who they're citing, right? Our argument is that one, you think that you're a form of refusal, but that's not true in the context of debate and the politics of
Okay,
recognition.
well, that's-
Two,
yeah,
our
I got it.
argument is also
That's
about
fine.
the way in
I
which
have more
your
questions.
authors actually cite people that use
Sure.
decolonization.
What is the
and it's a-
political as for Warren?
Right, I guess our argument is that the political is linear temporality, biopolitical futurity, perfection, and battery,
Why is-
regress, struggle,
why is
action,
refusal
labor, work.
faith in the
right?
political?
I don't think that because our argument is that you're not refusal.
Okay, well then what is refusal then? As
Right.
we all-
Our argument is that what our evidence?
Yeah,
Well,
like,
our
what,
refusal is to reject the one they see. Our argument is that the AF thinks that it's refusal, but it's really not.
You haven't read the evidence on that. In terms of the Sexton
I mean, that's
evidence,
a Sexton evidence
it's
that you're
not.
about to ask about.
Sexton makes the argument down like in the middle. Native studies scholars misrecognize the true horror of slavery, etc. as deculturization. What scholars are we citing that do that?
I mean,
It
your
seems
piece of
pretty
Tuck and Yang
homogenizing.
evidence, the citing of Wolf specifically.
Citing Wolf means that we're
Yes, because your argument is based on an ontological structure that
what?
understands settler colonialism
Yeah,
as a politics of
So
loss
I
and
guess
gain.
based on
Right,
Sexton-
we will quote
well,
evidence
based-
in the 2MC and the 1 and
Well,
R, that
based
suffice.
based on Sexton, what do you think native sovereignty is then?
Sure. So I think this question is actually the distinction that I'm going to draw here in the sand, which is that I think your attempt to even provide a definitional coherence to sovereignty in any way, shape, or form
That's why I'm just asking
places
you.
it.
I'm just asking.
I'm refusing to answer because I
Okay,
think
that's
so
fine.
mirrors the politics of the affirmative.
We agree with your argument, which is why we don't link to it. Anyway,
You
the next
literally
one.
have a
Yes,
tagline
you
that says
have an
sovereignty
argument
is
that talks
refusal,
about the way in which what sovereignty is.
which is a
And
definitional
also-
coherence
and-
of
Hold
what
on.
it is.
and
Based
also
on,
too-
based on Sexton's definition down at the bottom was abolition.
Right, our argument is that abolition is probably a refusal of said refusal.
Okay.
Right?
I think abolition exceeds the possibility of being contained within a
Yeah.
grammatical structure like that.
The cards are sent.
Dope. Yeah, let's wait.
Let me know when y'all got it. Let me know when y'all got it.
Okay.
I just went straight down. There's like a lengthy overview, so however y'all feel.
Do with that what you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
There's. I mean, yeah, I sent it to everyone, so we're good. Just making sure.
Is that your email, Marcus?
What's up?
Is that your email you're using?
Yeah, my other one.
Did you get our email?
No, I don't load Excel, so I have no idea. I'm sorry.
I just want to say, if you get through all these cards, I'd be really impressed. Unless they're not all cards. Unless some of them are just like lines. No,
Yeah,
it's
all
all the
cards.
cards. So if you get through all of them, you're just faster than me. Fair.
Well,
No
don't
one
be
feels
the
so
first
bad
person
out
to
there.
ever say that.
So am I supposed to get that I don't not gonna get through all the cards that I just got?
We'll see.
We'll see. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one he sees an act of refusal, one that refuses current climate change research and the way it frames indigenous people. The status quo functions in part on the framing of them as vulnerable and adapted that climate change will affect them uniquely, so the government needs to step in and do something. This frame of urgency ensures colonial intervention. Instead, we orient ourselves on how indigenous people like I don't know more or Teresa Smith who refuse food and use or bodily sovereignty, refuse the extractive forms of settler society. These structure indigenous women as rapeable because she poses a threat to settler sovereignty. The particularity of refusal allows us to turn the resources of the academy against itself by referencing the research it used to operate by refusing to recreate settler research. Instead, puts the colonial academy on the object of research and the way its research is used to export violence upon certain populations, placing settlerism as an object of research necessary to rupture the ways indigeneity is framed as a universal within academic space. It assumed a static and vulnerable debate is a side of research and about to signify whose praxis is one that should be endorsed of research, whose part of the academy is one that informs our action, understanding outside of this space ways that debate creates warming impacts. Now we will only lead this year understanding indigeneity as a vulnerable population should be refused in every instance. This is important for everyone in the room, no matter who you are. Refusal as a method is key to understanding why and how the academy and research within its use as a smooth functioning machinery that allows and also facilitate interdiction on indigenous and black lives. Now there is a top level. They don't have a link about refusal, which makes this debate hard for them to win. It means that the only risk repeating the static notion of indigeneity that Hunt is talking about within academic settings by re-entrenching certain frames about indigeneity. So permutation do both. This conceives of broke projects to be combined to tackle the very way settlerism, anti-blackness infiltrate the practices and activity debate will just intend. There was a black woman who used to yell at whites, Latinos, East and Southeast Asian students, staff, and faculty as they entered the university. She accused them of having stolen herself and of selling her into slavery. People said that she was crazy and Native American men sitting on the sidewalk informing President pedestrian that that here was where they could settle the land lease accounts and that had neglected to settle all their lives. He who was crazy. They would have to be crazy enough to call not merely the actions of the world to account, but to call the world itself into account for them. No less that the world calls her crazy and to do what she does in the world attributed to Native American man's insanity. He's crazy. If he thinks he's getting money out of us, that doesn't make him crazy. Rather indicate that he does not have a big enough gun to give Turtle Island back to the staff of his life himself, but back to his slave. Two simple sentences in the structure of the United States antagonism will be dismantled. Unethical modernity no longer sound like an oxymoron. What can so easily be spoken as ubiquitously unspoken? Now there is an interpolation to all their arguments. Resistance strategies are already being performed in the front lines, and so the question you face as an academic is how do we describe research and think about it and argue about these resistance strategies and repeats the same logic as settlerism by claiming any move against settlerism is just humanism. This relegates Indians to the world to a passive subject who can never resist settler colonies and tells no to Apple and I don't know more just to remain passive in the attempt to describe such the colonial acts as conciliatory gestures is only a historical and offensive. It also reifies the category of the human right before closing any ideological outside to it, interpreting all resistance is simply an extension of the modernist world. Now their sovereignty link doesn't make any sense in the context of the sextant assumes a focus on sovereignty that requires a project of reconciliation with the settled side. Refusal shifts this notion and instead finds a material sovereignty is incomplete project, but is found culturally. Their link creates Indians as static objects, which recreate the colonial project in terms of the ability for the all to solve their attempt to reduce indigenous sovereignty to its Western conceptualization is the coherence argument they're talking about. It's also rhetorical imperialism that engages natives only insofar as they are understood to relate to settler society. Moreover, this makes both black and native resistance impossible because it treats every act of refusal as a positive normative act to integrate into the category of the human. Now, Sexton's argument is anti-native, asking us to abandon land-based resistance is a form of auto-genocide culture art in Simpson 16. Sexton advanced an argument that are infected with anti-native sentiment insofar as they demand the indigenous people separate their justice claims from the supposedly anti-black character of the commitment to the land. The misrepresentation of indigenous studies and activism doesn't unwarranted disservice to the solidarity attacking the relation of the indigenous political orders. The strategic targeting of indigenous people's relationship to the land has been a side of indigenous white supremacy and heteropatriarchy, indigenous resistance and research and response to the dispossession force of the settled colonization and employ measures and tactics designed to protect indigenous territories and to reconnect indigenous bodies to land. Our relationship to the land itself generates a process of practice and also the informal political system and which we practice solidarity willfully abandon them would amount to a form of auto-genocide. Now the alt is just a refusal of refusal. This proves why if they win the alternative proves why refusal is a good method. In praxis they might be able to win that specific manifestations of refusal are bad, but this isn't indict the praxis writ large. You can view this as a kind of doubling argument because refusal is particular to each person. They have chosen their use of it as net benefit to the permutation that the alternative is impossible without the Afghan 13.
settler colonies from shapes and constitute black specifically slavery and after 11 American genocide, making the settler subjectivities and self-actualization do not immediately stop existing when they run to black bodies as settler colonies is a form of productive power that touches all that live in the United States in a very different way slavery and not adequately fully understand the process of the create blackness and all in the body genre slavery and anti-black racism are also not the only repressive powers that make the black body object of fungible and situated out of the limits of their beingness below slavery and settler colonies from structure modernity need to be fully conceptualized as a form of power that helps constitute blackness. Now, there are three net benefits of the permutation. It's crucial for effective analysis. It allows for an unflinching analysis of native genocide and avoids it collapse in comparative logic. The King in 13. Colonial settlement makes black female slaves a unit of the space of the genocide process that shapes the native and non-existent and important implication for the ontological question posed by the project of inseparability of genocide and settlement enforcement and ornament and examination of the production of the space in ways that always index the disappearance of the native theorizations. Through theorization, settler colonial relations still tend to pivot around the native settler binding native feminists are able to situate settler colonialism in the relation of slavery with native feminist scholars. Settler colonialism does not become a closed system of formation. What I appreciate about the field is unflinching focus on native elimination of their peaceful war and evidence. We agree that there are methods of refusal research. Actually, the research that settler colonialism wants us to produce is what actually produces within the trick of time that Warren is talking about. So we are linked turn to this argument. I've already answered the second argument above. We do not equivocate. Oppression's anti-blackness is obviously not equivocable to settler colonialism. That it will never be our argument. Now, colonization is no longer just a process of disarm and elimination, but the imposition of ideological desire upon indigeneity, which demands recognition from the state. Our refusal inverts this affective structure to enable new modes of indigenous resistance. Cicero Mar 16. Cultures analytic is made by the possible phenomena confronted colonial more directly by describing colonies in relation to the pure force that shift more toward a more settled institution. Deactivation, disarmament, infestation, militancy does not a phenomenon. Also has less relevance to the phenomenon. Decolonization, Hegel's master slave dialectic. He selects it out from under the table of recognition for context. A sort of doubling of the asymmetry in a situation where colonial rule does not depend on the exercise of the state violence of reproduction and rests on the ability to entice indigenous peoples to identify with the profoundly asymmetrical, non-reciprocal forms of recognition either imposed on or granted by the settler state in society of phenomenon. Colonialism is operating through a dual structure, i.e. objective and subjective. Culture sees a phenomenon and anticipating in effect or suppressing in his refusal to bend the stick too far forward towards the socioeconomic expansion of psychoaffective and refusing the condition of recognition is both the means and the end of revolutionary politics, only absolving ourselves of the affective investment and inclusion established the conditions of decolonialized Cicero Mara in 16. Fanon emphasizes the radical mutability in this revolutionary situation when the tradition is changing the meaning. He distinguishes the good tradition from bad, embracing some elements while discarding others, often on the basis of their relation to the colonial order itself. Some traditional leaders serve the order and render themselves irrelevant, and some traditions are embraced by the colonizer and become inert and lifeless. Such practices they exceed the struggle for the form of liberation. If anything, becomes more urgently necessary for us. Fanon is writing as he perceives the coming of post-colonial disillusionment. They themselves dissolve the distance between the two and pointed towards an understanding of decolonization as a substantive process in which the distance between the means and the ends disabates the goal is precisely the knowledge of the transformational role that really revived indigenous cultural practice might play to the construction of alternatives and colonial project and towards the end, which is always a means. We agree that our contributions have been and continue to be decisive. Now, the refusal is not trapped within the violence of dialectics. Decolonization is the politics of self-affirmation that destroys the hegemony of settler master. Cicero Mara 16. The Fanonian impulse to turn away from the master and back to the work on the world that is self-actualization and liberation. The culture emphasizes the phenomenon towards the positivity form of personal and collective self-affirmation. The phenomenon towards the turn away from the master. The central practical implication of his decolonization of the Hegelian master-slave dialectic constituted a resort instead of self-affirmation. Culture finds phenomenon to be ambiguous with regard to the source and the weight of his self. Now, I'm obviously Nico's right. I'm not fast enough to get rid of these cards. So the last argument I'm going to make is about about how coherency works within sovereignty claims. Now, right now, sovereignty claims are only understood through the material forms of the land. Our arguments are how we create incoherence about how we understand sovereignty, not through a rearticulation or a set definition or ontological definition, but how we can rupture the ways settler society understands sovereignty currently and create new forms that are outside of coherent structures.
That's the Spence.
That's a piece of Spence evidence. Cool. I'm gonna grab water, but want to open start?
Alright. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. You say that call or refusal should not be centered on land focus,
but you read a piece of evidence, I think it is the Cold Hard 16 card that says asking us to abandon land-based resistance a form of auto-genocide. Could you reconcile those claims?
Yeah, there's a duality. We can understand that how specific forms of sovereignty are understood, i.e. Coulthard and Simpson are talking about how sovereignty claims, i.e. the relationship between the land, are able to kind of rupture the way settler society functions.
Is that a form of sovereignty?
Huh?
Is that a form of
A
sovereignty?
relationship between land, that is, I guess, a form that could potentially arise. Our argument is about we shouldn't have an ontological grasp of how sovereignty is totality.
Fine,
in its
I guess.
totality.
Okay, your argument says that you're not trapped in a. You read this piece of Meyer 16 evidence that's referencing Fanon and his criticism of the Hegelian dialectics and say that you're not trapped in a form of dialectics of recognition but self-affirmation. But at the top of the flow, you said that everyone in this room should have fused the moment. How can you reconcile those claims?
Can you? I didn't hear the last part.
Well, I guess, and then at the top of the flow, you're like, refuse every moment. And also, everyone in this room should also refuse the way in which colonialism operates.
Our argument is that
how is that not a form of recognition?
Our argument is not that everyone must refuse. Our argument is, in fact, that refusal can be a.
I'm not actually about that.
No, I'm explaining what my argument actually is because you have a misconceptualization of it.
Okay,
That's my
sure.
thing. Our argument is that refusal is a methodological practice that should be endorsed. We're not saying that everyone should or has to do it. It's just that if it is a good way that we can break
Why
down
should
the
it
way
be endorsed by everyone? Why should it be endorsed?
For the judges specifically, we have an understanding of how we can break down the way indigeneity is framed within research practices. This, like the entire top overview, is an explanation of why refusal.
How do they understand that without a politics of recognition?
Well, recognition, the way that you're describing it, is just totally misaligned with what recognition is as per our authors. Recognition
Yeah, your
is
Meyer
not just-
evidence. That's what I'm
no,
interested
recognition
in.
is not just like the judges like recognizing that we won. It's about recognition within like things like legalistic strategies, like like asymmetrical forms of governance. Those are the status
And
quo.
that's
We
what
refuse
Fanon is?
them.
Alright, so then what is the master? What is the master when Fanon is talking about the master slave dialect?
Civil society.
Alright, then are there settlers in this room?
Yeah.
Okay then, I guess so then how
Your
does the person
your
on the
argument
end
would
vote for
presume
you?
a double
How does
bind
the
where you can
person
go
on
out
the
on
end vote
presumption.
as then?
Do what?
How does the person on the end, the judge on the end, vote as?
I answered that it would create a double bind when you go for this kind of recognition that Jeff's ballot creates a recognition. It would create a double bind.
Okay,
That
that's
which
fine.
you can just
Your
go down
piece
for
of Wilson
presumption.
evidence says that you tackle anti-blackness and settlerism. What does it mean to tackle anti-blackness?
Which card?
Your Wilson 10 evidence.
We talk about the way that that refusal can be a practical a method, like you all say. Like
I know,
you
where
use
in
it
the
as
Wilson evidence does it say that?
Oh, it just talks about incoherent demands. Our argument is about how refusal is kind of this mode of an incoherent demand upon civil
Can be
society.
combined with absolute negation.
But a demand isn't recognition.
Before I take prep, I'm going to use the restroom.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
2 years out is the rule on being able to judge.
It's like
All day.
it's every sugar street. It's just they
It's every day. So.
Just like
2 years
every
out
time
is
they
like
see
the
each
rule
other
for
and when
being
they
able to
reference,
judge
it's
your own
always
team, right?
always say like that way.
Okay, cool. Because I'm just checking the
that way.
seeing who I need to strike. Okay, cool. Because I remember this coming up earlier. I was
It's just
okay.
like every time it happens, I'm like,
As
yeah,
long as you
dude.
work out of the team at the same time.
That way.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, this is verified. How'd you get Marquise? All right. How you been?
How you been, you know?
I don't know. You know,
Has
I
anyone
mean,
ever
I just
asked
said
that?
I was all
How
right.
was he able?
Who you here with?
Rochester. Well, I mean, we're just here.
Yeah.
We're just.
I was curious if like, you were helping on a team or
Nah.
just here.
Just chilling.
Yeah, I got bored going to nature reserves.
That's a very yay home things. Very cool.
It's just a preserve. It's just like a small park with a trail.
Cool. So, after 10 minutes of prep, I'm going to take that 10 minutes starting now.
I'm gonna go make an appearance on their sides.
Is there a plug in that? I don't know, somewhere around here?
It's right over there.
Yeah, but I need my laptop to speak. It's at
Don't they got them
10%.
little things under here though? Do they? Around the table?
No.
Maybe you should speak from.
Yeah, actually,
come back here. I can move stuff.
yeah, I'll speak.
Or I can just move this thing, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
There we go.
Cool. That's them portable skills. Problem solving.
But you missing a whole judge.
That's okay. I still need to send out the file. So. Did you figure it out, Marquise? Like, do I need to add you the email chain?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, okay.
You just on the doc already.
I'm sending it right now.
Should be soon.
Should be sent, so you should get it pretty soon. Sounds like you got it. Can you pass me my food? Why is that part of the song stuck in my head so much?
It's the best part.
No. The best part is that way. I used to trap in the subway. That way. I used to trap with the AK. That's the best part of that song.
Exactly.
Get the phone call time.
Exactly. I'll pick up the phone and call.
Rachel's favorite line is, "Woof, I'm a dog."
Clearly thought you were gonna need more president.
Actually, this is the first term of this year that I really allowed myself to take more than 10 seconds of prep in the for the 2 and C.
Where's Khalid at?
He's on a coffee room.
For real? Alright, that's how you ice the 2 and C right here.
That way.
You know, y'all rich
You
niggas.
can fast forward. to that.
She said,
Y'all
"Oh,
rich,
right?"
right? You never had no old money.
No, like 245.
We got a whole lot of new money though.
Okay, cool. So it should be sent out. Let me know when you got it. There's gonna be like the ontology debate at the top, and then it's gonna be 2 AC order.
Is it new sheet worthy or?
Yeah.
It's this much?
Yeah.
So you put it
Go
on
ahead and
the
get
sheet
another
if
sheet.
you want.
Go ahead, another
Another
sheet.
sheet.
And have
Yeah,
another
sheet.
another sheet ready for the
So
one.
you put all you should all probably want a new sheet for the 1 and R. So like, because the 1 and R,
God.
as what Georgia told us yesterday, the 2 and C is very predictable, but the 1 and R is really where the surprises come. See, real quick anecdote. I was joking.
Wait, you don't give me a speech?
Because West
Did
Georgia
they
actually
overkill the
quoted the first 6 lines of my 2 and C that I say in their 2AC. Anyway, okay, cool. So. If I win the ontology debate, I win the round. Ontology determines the structure of society and being itself, meaning questions of reform, the ethics, the efficacy of solvency and value itself following ontological determinations. Their evidence operates at an epistemological level, but ontology over-determines epistemology because structures demarcate the possible limits of how one interprets epistemological experiences, thus winning that blackness exists in ontological antagonism has a few damning implications. Firstly, that the affirmative project insofar invests in anti-black metaphysics reifies the very system of violence which pulverizes black being and replicates settler colonialism. Secondly, that the affirmative project will inevitably fail because ontological structures determine the political libido economies which demarcate the limit of possible actions. Third, in terms of any pedagogical value of the affirmative because it means its pedagogic and social objectives are dependent on black death coherence. Fourth, in terms of any impact calculus to tell you understand value and ethical calculus are all determined by anti-blackness. Anti-blackness is the meta-ethical framework for the debate has to be addressed first because it makes ethics itself coherent. 113. Violence constitutes the human sustained on long time ontology of blackness, which is bound with human solution for all ontology. In essence, blackness is not exist the foot of ethics until it's dirty secret on the ground. It is situated as unethical. Ethics subverts itself can only exist through various subversion of all ethical discourses organized around the elimination of suffering or experiences of freedom or imbricated in this unethicality. Blackness with the life and death of humanism is ethical, lacks logical grammar. There being human suffering, not the superior solution of blackness, but there be no world of human knowledge solution either. Now, the first argument is that the act of refusal is what's the. But I'm going to have a link to that on the link debate. I'll do that on the permanent. But you should note the notion of bodily sovereignty here is going to be particularly important to how they frame the rest of the debate. The next argument is that they turn research against themselves. This presumes an epistemic project that is not a simple refusal, but in fact an attempt to change the structure of the academy itself. Do not let them shift the true intentions of the affirmative. You should be reading between the lines of the text to see the unconscious investments that they're making and change. The next argument is indigeneity is the vulnerable that should be refused, but this can only be refused as a flight away from absolute vulnerability, which is blackness. This is a disavowal of blackness that is what makes their project legible because they can conceptualize a subject that is not constantly in violence. Now the permutation debate, I'm going to do the links here. Now I'm going to go for 4, and I think this should be particularly damning. The first is the logical, political, linear integrality, political future, protection, betterment, redress, struggle, action, work, labor is found everywhere in the affirmative. I've pulled quotes. Quote, the point is not to delay action on climatic change, but rather to undertake action that addresses precisely the issues and concerns that have repeatedly been identified. That's the quote from Cameron. This proves that the affirmative is invested in allowing the possibility of political action against climate change to take place. This is biopolitical futurity, betterment, and struggle. Quote, I think that the impetus to act and to change and to transform for me exists. Quote for Simpson, this proves the affirmative project is not invested in the destruction of the world, but rather is attempted in changing it. This locates the affirmative project as against the policies and practices of the world, not the world itself. That's temporality, redress, and struggle. These metaphysics reproduce the very violence which pulverize black being. Ensures a affirmative finds its affirmation through a politics of black death. That's war. Now B is the most massacred subject. You don't have to rock with me here. Simpson, Klein, and Cameron all presume a normative human subject who, having ethical integrity, is violated as such, ethically deserves redress. This, however, can only operate so long as the native makes an appeal to humanity. Affirmative can't escape this logic either. Simpson is the discussion of how native women represent the possibility of a future that has been foreclosed but must be recovered. This assumes a temporality normative subject who can follow the narrative arc of equilibrium, disequilibrium, equilibrium restored, that is parasitic upon the scandal of blackness and mirrored in the affirmative at the pre-contact, the arrival of the settler colonialism, and the possibility of decolonization follows that narrative arc. Furthermore, the framing of sovereignty as refusal is irrelevant. You can only refuse what you can choose, but that presumes a subject with ontological resistance. The Architect's evidence says, quote, this point is not mitigated by the fact that native sovereignty is qualitatively different from the sovereignty of nation states. What link these statements discursively is the ethico-onto-epistemological point of contact. At every scale, they can practice cartography, and although at every scale their maps are radically incompatible, their respective mapness is never in question. In other words, even if they're a non-Westphalian conception of sovereignty, the posit their claim within the rubric of losses, future, land, culture, etc., and gains, futures based on relativism. This is damning based on the Coulthard and Simpson evidence, which indicates a type of relationality that must be preserved. They'll claim that it's not about land, but their Simpson evidence cites Patrick Wolff to say settler colonialism has characterality, its irreducible element. This theorization of land and resources even scaled down to the level of the individual body. Simpson writes that, quote, these bodies of the indigenous are more than just flesh. Such a sentence only has semantic integrity insofar as the body can be rendered coherent. This invests in a humanist grammar of suffering that is antagonistic to the slave's grammar of suffering. For extractivism to be a taking, as their Simpson evidence says, there must be the possibility of indigenous bodies having the capacity to have and lose. That's wildership. Now C is untimeliness. Time does not progress for black folks. Time does not accumulate. Rather, blackness destroys time. What is the two lateness of micron body and the sun, the two earliness of the 1.8 seconds to constitute to mere rights, or the violent lupus and repetitions of Eric Gardner's I can't breathe. Black Anti-blackness' relation to time is antagonistic. The affirmative locates its future through utopian further in which the refusal will have generated new futures. That is the tuck and yang evidence. But this can only assume as subject with a normative relation to time. That's Murillo. Now D is worlding. The affirmative project is a line of flight into the world, not towards the end of it. I've pulled quotes. Quote, by refusing the telos of colonial future, desire expands possible futures. That's a quote from Tuck and Yang. That proves the affirmative refusal is investing in the creation of new futures, new worlds. This is a positive investment in society to come maybe, but not the end of all possible worlds. Quote, this navigation of indigenous and academic worlds, quotes from Hunt, relies upon a semantic integrity of worlding to become possible for the possibility of navigation and refusal within the academy. This recreates anti-black violence because the metaphysics of worlding and relationality become possible through the dissertation of black being. That's wrong. Now my last link I think is the most damning. This is the black matrix, and it's also the link to refusal. The centering of the native woman is still presuming a subjective capacity of refusal that is not afforded to the black matrix. Their subject presumes a body and not flesh. It presumes the possibility of consent/refusal instead of racial rape as not simply an experience but ontology structuring position. The grammar of their speech is most revealing. Here's some lines. Quote, native women are rendered rapeable and extract because they're seen by the possibility of native futures. Tag from Simpson shows that native women become in a position of consent that is violated, moving to the position of rapeability. Furthermore, shows that native futures are possible in the first place and then lost. The affirmative hopes recovered. Quote, she declared her body as a sign of sovereignty and refusal. Lasting weeks surviving influence, defying what is she required to do as an Indian, which is die. Tag from Simpson. Notice the grammatical revelations here. Her possibility of having a coherent body, the possibility of mapping sovereign meaning of Pullman's body, the possibility of refusing the violence and interpolation imposed. Quote, extraction is taking without consent. That's the quote from Simpson. I have so many quotes that I don't have enough time to read them all. All of this speaks to the fundamental affirmation of consent, which requires black women to be locked into a position of absolute rapeability, which serves as a point of contradistinction, which describes the possibility of existential struggle away from gendered violence. They're even in their Simpson evidence to highlight, they even choose in their Simpson evidence to highlight the phrase highly rapeable instead of unrapeable, which bespeaks to the libidinal in evidence that they wish to disavow that fact. And now also, you're misreading Wilderson. What does it intend? Whereas the savage demand for the terms of the island would surely obliterate the cartographic integrity of the United States, not for a conclusion that it would obliterate the subjective integrity of the settler master by demanding the cartographic institution and nation state a return to neighboring paradigms of sovereignty would need not destroy the spatial and temporal capacity of human existence. The most prolific ontologists of indigenous sovereignty are quick to point out such a restoration, while bad for the United States as a settlement, would ultimately be good for settlers. This is a damning indication of misreading of rules that replicates the fungibility of black scholarship and this is a false any form of refusal. Now, I think this takes out the permutation for two reasons. One, every link proves radical incompatibility between the affirmative project of refusal and the negatives asking to divest of all libidinal energy from these type of movements. The second is the jouissance sad. The affirmative literary beneficial parents will someday participate in anti-black metaphysics, and so it makes them all the more dangerous. It seduces people to invest in systems that kill them while doing something good. Straight heel reinvestment, that's war. And the next argument is interrelation, but this is wrong because it presumes the possibility of interpolating the native and not quote. I'm pulling quotes. You've interpolated yourself. The next argument is anti-native, but one, no, it's not. It's a refusal to be coherent. We're not asking you to lose spirituality, but not to forward it as a coherent political project. And two, this is a, once again, disavowal of blackness. The possibility of not wanting to be placed in genocide is the disavowal of blackness itself. The next argument is the refusal to refuse, but this is not the alternative. That'll be in the one and all. The next is the King evidence, which says the opposite is impossible. One, look at the Sexton evidence. It says that abolition is already the promise of communism, decolonization, settler decolonization. The study of slavery is already the study of capitalism. Colonization and settler colonization means we solve the affirmative, but the affirmative never solves us. The permutation proves they have to move to us, not the other way around, which means that you can vote negative. The permutation is a negative argument. It proves that they are not where we already are. The next argument is that the crude issue that benefits the sex never resolves this. If we're already the study, if we're already the promise, then we don't have to have the affirmative. There's only a risk that they reify anti-black. The sexism is that they're not political hope. I did that work above. They say colonization demands recognition, but Simpson locates refusal as a demand. That's why she refuses the possibility of demanding that indigenous populations not be seen as vulnerable, that their life won't be recognized, etc., etc. It's not simply a refusal, it's refusal galvanized as a demand. The next argument is that allows for decolonial life. This is a link. It presumes that there's a possibility of life that should be affirmed. It's not a question of some forms of life versus others. It's a question of no life, never life, the abolishment of all forms of life. That is also improves the narrative arc argument here. The next argument is decolonization is self-affirmation. You should be looking at our sex and it says that slavery is not the loss of land, lineage, language, or culture, but is the loss of a self that could experience such a loss. The preposition that decolonization is based on self-affirmation presumes the subjective capacity to have a self that could be affirmed. The next argument here is that we only understand as rupture, but no, you're not. The reification of Western metaphysics, only one reifies the intensity of black suffering and is parasitic upon that suffering in order to galvanize this movement, but secondly, replicates the settler colonial project because it invests in the same humanist metaphysics that your King evidence says galvanizes both settler colonialism and anti-blackness. One second, actually. Yeah.
Cool. I guess my first question is, how do we understand how ontology gets produced?
Sure. So I think that you can actually look at the way that over like both kind of psychoanalytic and political economies have placed people within a specific structural position over hundreds, arguably thousands of years, beyond time itself, I think. And that creates a certain position that people are placed within, even if there's maybe a question of like, did epistemology or ontology come first? I think that these structures have been
So how do
cemented.
these psychoaffective structures, how are they created?
Right. So one, I think that our evidence might like kind of critique this notion of looking for a beginning and endpoint to like where we are now, right? Because it kind of relies upon a linear temporality. But I think secondly, I think that like I've pulled some quotes that I think reveal your libido investment and the libido investment of your authors. I think that's sufficient to at least prove that maybe if like 2,000 years ago that wasn't here, it's definitely here right now.
So the last argument you can make is about Sexton and how the slave is the loss of the self. I guess, how do you reconcile that with Fanon's reading of him having a self?
Right. I mean, I think that Wilderson has this little line where he says on the same page, you can see Fanon, the post-colonial subject, and Fanon, the slave. I think also it would be wild to ask, like any of us, right, to constantly think that we could ever always disavow the thing ever. But I think in a debate round, there's a unique libidinal space here.
Can you repeat the Wilderson line? Fanon.
Oh yeah, he has this line in the conclusion of Red, White, and Black where he says on the same page you can see Fanon, the post-colonial subject, and Fanon, the slave. And he says that Fanon kind of backs away from his own fires.
Right, and also too, whenever you're referencing Fanon, you're looking at the wretched of the earth. Our argument is one that is a black skin, white mask, and the way in which you cannot run away. Okay.
Yeah, I understand that, but what happened in between the colonial self and the slave
So
self?
my argument is I don't think that Fanon actually experiences those things, or at least not at an ontological level, right? Fanon's making a phenomenological analysis.
Yeah.
Do you think it's distinct from the type of ontological project we're making? I think the conflation between the two actually is what gives rise to a large problem in native studies.
My question is more, what created that shift from him and
Okay, so my claim is that Fanon obviously phenomenologically experienced a self in the colonial situation, or what he believed to be a self, right? But ontologically, he never was like a colonial subject and then a black subject. He was always just a black subject. The desire to not be a black subject, to run away from one's own blackness, produces the fantasy of subjecthood to invest in. But that own investment in subjecthood requires an affirmation of anti-black libidinal structures.
Cool. I'm good.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool.
I'm about to just stick this car real quick.
You said you're sending it?
Yeah, I'm sending it. Well, I'm about to send it right now. I got it.
Yeah, you're good. I was just like, making sure I didn't want to.
That's a great question. I did not coach that.
I'm not tired. I just catch my breath.
It's just like, it's literally just named 2 AC cards.
That's what your deck is called?
Yeah.
Is Nico's that what you meant? You didn't know what he's going to read the 2 AC cards I didn't get to? Is that what you meant?
Basically.
That's what happens. That happens in like 10% of stuff.
Nico, can you pass me my flow real quick?
You float every sheet on different paper, so is it this one?
Yeah. Shit. I guess when we started the cold hard six, y'all just need to throw me on a separate sheet of paper. I'm gonna signpost where I'm going. I promise you.
The computer, that's easy.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That okay with y'all? You can put me on a separate sheet of paper. It will be answering their argument, I promise you.
But why are those so dirty?
Refuse to be coherent.
Y'all want a piece of paper? I'll give you a piece of paper. Alright, hey, you got. Alright, let's get it.
Yeah, we good.
Let me know when I get like 20 seconds left.
20 seconds left?
Yeah. Alright.
Don't let them frame our argument. All the arguments are linked to our theorization of blackness and cross-sex proof that this is just a form of distancing and proved in round as anti-blackness escapes the realms of ontological integrity. Now, Nico may not have enough time to reference more quotes, but I got you, Nico. Look at their code 36 and Simpson 16 evidence as there, and this is a huge link to the fact that they find sovereignty and land-based resistance. As I quote, our commitments to land and jurisdiction that are form identity as well as ethical relations with others. Now, another quote, indigenous resistance and resurgence in response to the dispossessive forces of settler colonization employ measures and tactics designed to protect indigenous territories and reconnect indigenous bodies to land. And here's the biggest quote, our relationship to land itself generates the processes, practices, and knowledges that inform our political systems and through which we practice solidarity. To willfully abandon them would amount to a form of auto-genocide. Now, this is the rhetoric in these debate spaces that are highly important and reveals our unconscious orientations, as Nico talking about a libidinal investments that are always a disavow toward the slave, or always leave the slave in the position of the untouched. All their arguments are non-starters throughout theorization of black. They have mental fundamental framing argue that the levels of power is controlled by a white superego or white racist guy in opposition to the black subject, which means that you should view this speech as Oklahoma JW checklist of how you should filter their arguments and lens of the criticism. Now, you have not read an argument against psychoanalysis, which means that your social conception of social psychoanalysis and sociogenic reading of anti-blacks from the criticism means that we get all your balance today because our warrant evidence say that people are rational but rather operate according to the sense of psychoanalytic laws of an anti-black symbolic order. This is hypercharged with their concession of the libidinal economy argument, which means that we're going to be controlling their frame issue in this debate. The schema of black savior creates by Dermy's action for subjectivity. You crucify a piece of sex and evidence and concepts of rationality and overturns individual actions and unconscious trial through a process that created a form of mental story, form of mind that gets created in the libido, the instinctual and desires and energy that possesses a scaleless signifier of natal alienation, void, and metaphysical entry, or what we would like to classify as lack upon the black imago and psyche to justify non-black subjectivity and the destruction of kinship from black folk. Now, let me give you a counter-history lesson that proceed to have anti-black shapes the world. The Arab slave trade that started in 642 AD, and the ideas of slave Africans were even before their colonization of America, which means that the indigenous bodies entered to a world that was always anti-black. Now, you can go to the trigger type argument because I'm going to be doing some more work here, and you can cross-apply Murillo evidence. Shout out to John Murillo III, and I'm going to warn out legal claim the scholastic framework of the one he thinks is not resiliency or just a refusal, but attempts to illuminate the past and invoke a possible future, such as a project or a future that is not yet to come, that can do these processes of decolonization that can be seen with the narrative of the one you see that positives pre-contact equilibrium, the arrival of settler contact disequilibrium, and then the refusal as an act of decolonization equilibrium just proves our piece of Murillo evidence as their theological process doesn't understand that black time doesn't move linearly but rather accumulates gratuitously. This belief in biopolitical futurity defers the confrontation with reality indefinitely in favor of a non-black imagined impossible future that is parasitic upon the polarization and consumption of black being to create the possibility for their process of refusal, as you will still be left with the question of where do black folks go in the imagination of the affirmative, because where black folks have no sovereign homeland, then they can imagine returning to the settler to Europe, but where the one return life back to the slave. This can be seen with the rejection of black Cherokee folks that are always excluded from the Cherokee nation. This is a huge self-esteem deficit to the affirmative. They are not a line of flight away from metaphysics, but a line of flight back into the same metaphysics that they criticize that de-escalates the totalizing nature of anti-black antagonists. Now, you can go to the alt debate. The alt is just not a simple refusal of a refusal, or that is more nuanced than that, a rejection of the AF officer, an orientation to a political apostasy of the affirmative that attempts to vote, that attempts to divest a rhetorical and effective hope in the idol of the political and land as the spiritual practice denounce the metaphysical violence in black suffering across the proper piece of warrant evidence here. As alternatives now, one of utopia or restitution, as the act of renouncing will not change political structure or offer a political program. We obviously recognize that, but instead it's the act of retrieving the spiritual concept of hope from the captivity of the political, which doesn't begin with the orientation of an affirmation or refusal such as the affirmative, but established with blackness as a being towards death that lacks the ability to have ontological semantic integrity of the concept of life and death itself. We shouldn't breathe life back into the system or the paradigm, as Nico said. We should let this motherfucker suffocate. Now, you can group all their king evidence and all their ontology claims on their Meyer evidence that the affirmative centralization, settler colonial violence, the roots of analogy which individualize the fungible position of blackness that subtend the colonial encounter their narratives of redress and reclamation, which posit neutrality of possession and is thus complicit in the gratuitous violence of racial slavery. Both negative embraces the political ontology of pessimism, which raises the stakes of debate to forward conceptual tools for revolution. This card is fire, so actually, so look at it after around that section 16. Rather than blackness as a cultural identity, Afro-pessimism theorizes a position, accumulation, and fundamental relation of ontological death. Afro-pessimism, this is not about inherent incapability, but rather imposed incapacity to appreciate this entity of the marked by racial blackness of the state of virtual non-communication is not undermined by exception in a global semantic field structured by anti-black solidarity. A black position holds a singularly transformative possibility. The color line operates as the division into blackness and non-blackness, slavery, contrasted freedom rather than whiteness and non-white. The libidinal economy does not only describe structure, but more importantly, the fantasy of unlimited destructive sexual consumption and social availability. This should not be confused with a race-first analogy, which presumes that analogy of winter obtained within the process of racialization to deconstruct the conflict between the agents of colonialism and indigenous people from the advantage of the enslaved African. This third perception is individualized in spite of the centrality of enslavement to the development of post-1492 society. The African descendant population formed the triadic model rather than the indigenous settler conflict. Half a century before 1492, the Iberian prerogative has established 1441 the enslaved indigenous slavery, slavery at the only legitimate enslavable population that would generate the principle of non-specificity that would bond settlers with the indigenous folks. Enslaved Africa would embody the construct of race or innately different that would enable sovereignty over land by instituting. You can market it instituting.
Cool. How much time do you all have?
I'll just go fill up your bottle.
You know, it's just.
You got your phone on you?
Yep.
Okay.
just.
Yeah, basically, unless I tell him I need something from him, he's gone. I'm usually the one that stays in the room after the round, no matter what they run.
Yeah.
And then I always tell the judges to give me a 5 minutes heads up before they feel like the decision's over. So that way I have time to go look and find him. Actually, let me go find him now, because of course his phone is dead. He probably has time to try to smoke a cigarette.
Still private.
No.
No, we're waiting on it.
You go to find Darius.
I'm definitely gonna help record y'all, you know what I'm saying? Fuck that team, fuck with the damn team. Hey, Darius, you got an iPhone charger?
Nah, Android.
Hey, you got an iPhone charger? Y'all got an iPhone charger?
You should check with Riley, though he had one in his backpack earlier.
Probably no more than, less than 5 minutes?
What?
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, assuming just down.
Yeah, I'm going down. Like, doing the best I can based on that structure. Alright, but yeah, I'll like let you know where I am.
I'm sorry, just straight down, you said?
Like, honestly. Just,
The
I think.
ontology page, from
Yeah.
line by line.
I mean, yeah, I'm like doing a very short case overview.
She
It is
calls it
short.
Oklahoma JW checklist.
Yeah, I am dealing with ontology like relatively first up. Since if we win the ontology debate, we win the debate. Alright, we're good?
Top of every 2 ANC. Let's go.
Good. Stellar colonialism is a deathly structure that animates logics of elimination, dispossession, extraction of indigenous people, kinship with flesh bodies, reproduction, cosmologies, and sovereignty. The only option is refusal of extraction, research, dispossession, reconciliation, and representational practices that banish idiots from academic spaces. Refusal turns Stellarism into an object itself. This shifts research from being focused on violated Indians and Native Savior to centering the structure of colonial non-production and making the meta-narrative of Stellarism the object of research and refusing to make indigeneity intelligible and coherent. This turns a resource of the Academy against itself and stultifies a extractive research that is exported out to indigenous populations. Winning ontology doesn't get you anything unless you win 100% reciprocal link and an internal link to metaphysics writ large. Either nihilism and negation is compatible with refusal, and there's a distinction without a difference, or there's a distinction, but that distinction is violent to indigenous women because it's based on negation of indigenous women's creation of value via their own modes of refusal. This is not a question of weighing impacts, but of understanding that they just don't solve a rapid link filter that makes it easy for you to resolve. Is that the crucial interlink to every link and impact and threat is recognition and reconciling with civil society and Stellarism, which is something the ONC actively refuses. You should air on this question because we are the only ones with contextual evidence about what refusal means in the context of indigeneity, whereas they just have blanket assertion, zero link to Warren. The F is not based on the political view. The lines they're reading from just proves how hard they're reaching. Our cards say that land is a thing for indigenous relationality, that futures are a thing. The distinction is that they haven't won how we produce the same hope that Warren is criticizing recognizing our link turn to this makes much more sense, which is also why it makes all the lines they're reading from irrelevant. Settler states use political hope in the form of reconciliation and recognition strategies in the form of nation-to-nation recognition now, which is why we posit refusal as a response to that false hope. This is our entire act. Now, the body flesh arguments assume that natives are granted ontological privilege by being bodies and not just flesh or Simpson evidence. It's fucking phenomenal. Here, native women move from being flesh to bodies, quote unquote, only so they can be legally limited and raped by being translated to bodily property of their husbands. It's why the Indian Act established patriarchal governance in Indian territories. It was legal femicide that prevented native women from becoming chiefs if they married out. Now, there's zero link to their sovereignty analysis. Sexton assumes settler notions of sovereignty that we refuse. There's Day, Simpson, Hunt, and Spice Girls all indicate the refusal of compromising with the settler state. Saying no to extermination is the opposite of reconciliation. There is a double blind for this link argument. Either my above analysis is correct and there's no risk of a link as per Sexton's own argument, or their explanation would still refuse moments of refusal, like Teresa Spence, who went on a hunger strike, used her body to say no to food as just a means of telling the Prime Minister to fuck off. She was incoherent in that moment. If they say those acts of refusal are bad, they remove the possibility of native women to just refuse colonialism with their bodies that have been taken from them. They have been marked as flesh, and they force native women to accept the extraction of that flesh, which is impacted out by Simpson. Sexton forces natives into an auto-genocide by interpolating all discussions of land as being colonial. This misrepresents native studies, indigenous cultural relationships with territory, makes any form of research into refusal impossible because land is a defining characteristic of indigeneity. This is impacted out by our Hunt evidence, which is phenomenal, and indicates that those representational strategies that they use to vanish Indians and indigeneity is quite literally what allows lands and conceptually materially to facilitate displacement and to render them less than human, which is a quote from our Hunt evidence. Yes, it is about the actual theft of land. It's a necessary heuristic for indigenous people to coalesce around to separate themselves from people like settlers. And incoherence might be good in theory, but it's not accessible for all native communities who are fragmented like those in our Simpson evidence and who they're speaking to. Refusal is something that indigenous people can just use to fucking say no. Genocide is sovereignty or co-constitutive because the stealing of the land, that is what made genocide possible, which is why I'll do the King debate here. She says that slavery and anti-black racism are not adequate to fully understand the material and discursive practices that create blackness in all its body forms. In North America, King says fungible accumulation needed a place to happen, which is why settler transcendence was built from the co-constitution of red and vanishing flesh, and black fungible flesh needed non-existence was crucial to the processes by which plantations could force reproduction onto black women, which is why this is responsive to James. The wombs of black women needed to be constituted as a hold for future slaves, but the wombs of native women were always already ghosted. The reason that white settler subjectivity requires more than fungibility and accumulation is to constitute transcendence. Vanishing native folks is crucial to produce a clearing upon which the plantation can be realized, which also disproves all of their ontology arguments, because it proves that their theory of violence is just wrong, because native folks are not fungible. They do not accumulate, they vanish. The one in our Sexton evidence assumes that we equivocate colonization and anti-blackness. I'll make this abundantly clear. Our King evidence indicates that they are different structures, but there are crucial overlaps, which is why you should prefer the co-constitution nature of the permutation. There's also no double turn who's clear cross-sex. They are completing the word recognition generically with what recognition means in the context of asymmetrical governance. A permutation axis in coherence, much better. Our reading of Wilderson concedes that you don't move towards giving Turtle Island back to the savage. You leave half of civil society's antagonism intact. The black women who yelled at Columbia, the Indian men who yelled at Berkeley were labeled as crazy and incoherent. We do not misread Wilderson because their evidence assumes settler notions of sovereignty. This is responsive to the 2 evidence that Nico reads, because those are all notions of sovereignty that we explicitly refuse. We say those forms of sovereignty are literally bad. Permutation do both means we refuse extractive research and dispossession reconciliation. We refuse freedom as per Wilderson, which is consistent because Wilderson assumes settler notions with the net benefits of refusal, climate research, red vanishing, all which they can't solve, which is why permutation is never a negative argument, and why they can't solve the even if any of the link arguments are true, the permutation is either the framing or inclusion or exclusion by reframing of the way that redress operates. Refusal as an analytic is something one that turns away from simple recognition to the settler societies and orients away inward that rejects forms of recognition that appeal to settlerism. The phenomenon indicates that the difference between good traditional practices and bad ones that reconcile the settler master. If we win our argument about refusal, rupturing settlerism, and how it's mutuality within revolutionary settings, you can vote after. We were already in the direction of the alternative. The distinction doesn't come to grips with our for non-argument. Even in Black Spin White Mass, the conclusion, he affirms himself as a human, as his radical mode of self-affirmation and a refusal of colonial recognition. Their real evidence assumes that a real reformulation of this world. We only reasons that's why our research is good, which takes out most of the impact they go for in the one hour, which is why our modern evidence proves our practice of refusal is one that should be affirmed, because it shows that a particular each person useful, and it's useful as a practice as settlerism for large.
Cool. I have 9, 10. I'm gonna take that starting now. Since Joe's not here to...
No.
Oh, yeah, you are. Do you want to mute the mic? Because I want to play music.
Sure, yep.
Cool. No, I get to choose music. It's my true art. Also, some soul. Okay, cool. So, talk about the points of the debate that I think need to be resolved, and arguments I think we won. And I'm going to signpost what those arguments are as I go down. Cool. Is everyone good?
Yeah.
You can vote negative because the concession of the War 13 evidence is particularly damning. The loss of the meta-ethics claim means that you're voting negative automatically because anti-blackness structures ethics itself means that the impacts of the affirmative only can become coherent as ethical violations only insofar as they can affirm anti-blackness as the absolute point of violence. There should be no two-error answers to this because I'm not going to get a 3-and-R. This should frame the rest of my speech. They're wrong about the King evidence. The first thing is the discussion about the genocidal grammar of native peoples as disavowed through the affirmative dip at recuperation and recovery. Look at the way they frame refusal as the possibility of re-navigating the academy, and also as their tongue-in-cheek evidence as is opening up new possible worlds. But furthermore, it's not sufficient evidence to James because James claims that native women aren't not that native women are not raped or that they're not vanishing, but that the black matrix serves as an absolute point of gendered violence that gives coherence to violation and injury that becomes necessary to articulate the violence against native women. Now, the next argument is the only piece of offense I think you have in this flow is this auto-genocide decided one. Don't link. The argument is not that native spirituality is somehow anti-black, but rather that the affirmative is capturing spirituality and transforming it into a political advocacy relies upon the anti-black metaphysics in order to become coherent and demand for regions. And two is I've impacted her this argument. The demand that natives not being disavowed of the position of legitimate grammatically reveals the flight away from blackness. The bottom of the pile is always black, always genocide, always derelict, always selflessness, always landlessness. They, as the savage subjects in O Settler, reveal the own savage negrophobia here. The demand that they not be placed in the position of genocide grammatically reveals that such a bottom exists even only in fantasy. That bottom is always blackness. She goes on to say that stealing makes genocide possible, but concedes the Section 16 evidence. You should have listened to the 1 that says that in 1440, 50 years before 1492 even happens, the colonization of West Africa, which did not require settler colonization, gave rise to the Mafar, or genocide of black people across Islam. The colonization does not necessitate genocide. The theft of land is not a necessary grammar for that. Now, the only next argument I'm going to go to here is the link debate. Actually, I'm going to do the alternative. A rejection of the app offers a complete refusal. The one sees attempted to vote for rhetorical and affective idol, a hope in the idol of the political. The alternative is not one of utopia restitution, but is an act of renouncing that is not to change political structure to offer a political program. Instead, it retrieves the spiritual concept of hope from the captivity of the political. Let me be clear. The question of debate is whether or not you ought to make some sort of libidinal investment in the affirmative. While yes, some level of libidinal investment in anti-blackness is likely inevitable, the intensity of that investment, at least here in this debate round, is not. Our alternative is not a world of self-excommunication or the refusal of worlds, but the possibility, loss of any possibility of a world at all. Links. I'm going to do some link framing for you here because I want to be clear with the criticism. The question debate is whether or not you should libidinally invest in the future world of the affirmative. This is especially important because the debate rounds we're making libidinal investments, recognition, identification, valuation in possible worlds. Our arguments that the affirmative is asking you to make libidinal investments in anti-blackness, which you should reject. Here are 3 links that I think prove this. One is the logic of the political. They cannot avoid this. Linear temporality, bipoliticity, perfection, better research, action, work, labor is omnipresent. These logics are not neutral, resolving in a particular metaphysical understanding and orientation about the world that become coherent through contradistinction of blacknesses. Blacknesses, non-temporality, gratuitous violence, and non-being for as the grounding for temporality, the alleviation or affliction of violence, and being because we know that those things by their inverse. Don't forget the quotes I read you in the 2 and C. Here they are again real quick. Quote, the point is not to delay action on climate change, rather to undertake action that addresses precisely the issues and concerns that have been repeatedly identified. Quote from Cameron, that's biopolitical futurity, betterment, and struggle. Quote, I think the impetus to act and to change and transform from me exists. Quote from Simpson, that's linear temporality, research and struggle. These metaphysics reproduce the various systems involved pulverized black being. That ensures the environment finds positives and affirmation of black death. That's war. Now 2 is worlding blackness' relation to the future to come, and the world to come as an antagonist relation, which the affirmation of the future obliterates by being the narrative arc of equilibrium prior to contact, disequilibrium, the current present moment, the arrival of the settler colonialism, equilibrium restores, refusal, decolonization, requires the subject with a normative relation in time is mirrored in the affirmative. It moves throughout these stages. It becomes coherent through anthropological and cultural codes that can be mapped with semantic integrity to map such an argument, ignores the narrative and blackness or antagonistic. I'm gonna hit you with the quotes again once real quick. Quote, means any future we imagine must quote, I have those. This shows the type of fantastical wording that the tucking emphasis says the refusal of the colonial timeline offers allowed to expand the possible roles to invest, and that's from tucking yang. Now, 3 is the most mastered subject. Psych, that's the wrong number. The 1AR thinks that this is about land and sovereignty, but it's not. It's about subjectivity. Our second emphasis says the point is not mitigated by the fact that native sovereignty is quality different from sovereignty of nation states. What links these statements is discursive is the ethical, epistemological point of contact at every scale. Think both practice cartography. Now, though at every scale the maps are widely compatible, the respective mountainous is never in question. In other words, even if there is not Western land conception of sovereignty, the positive claim within a rubric of losses, future land, culture, and gains, futures nation realization. She even concedes in the 1 AR that land is a necessary rubric for native people to move into bodies to flesh or refusal. All still presumes a subject with the ontological capacity for refusal, but in operating under the grammar of suffering, they preclude the non-grammar of blackness who are entering native women's bodies as having the possibility to move between body and flesh. They reveal the subjective capacity for native women, which depend upon black women to be locked into a position of absolute rapeability, which serves as the point of contradistinction, would give rise to the possibility of external struggle away from gendered violence. They can see the punctuation of their speech. I'm doing it in the 2 and C when I point out that they choose to highlight highly rapeable instead of unrapeable in their card because they themselves are invested in the possibility of native coherence. Now, they say that winning ontology means I have to win 100% of the link. One, I don't think that's true for 2 reasons. One, I'm going to win 100% of the link, but 2, the section of it is pretty damning, indicates that the study of slavery is already the study of colonization, decolonization, communism. This abolition is already decolonization, communism, settled decolonization, but the affirmative is not the same, which means that you can vote negative on the risk of a link because we're going to solve the libido investment that makes the affirmative impacts possible, but they're not going to solve ours, which is the inverse. The permutation is a negative argument, not in the sense that it proves that we are already you. You have to make the move to be us, reveals the fact that they have to move towards blackness, but presumes that the affirmative did not start there. And this is particularly damning in case that you can vote negative. Now, the
also, the permutation assumes that you can refuse what you can't.
The permutation assumes you can refuse, but you can only refuse when you have the possibility of choosing, presumes a subjective capacity.
already. I'm just gonna go straight down. So.
Just get my shit in order here.
Here you go. Anyone? Everyone good? Okay. The one he sees a process of refusal, one that reorients how research is oriented towards one of extraction, both ideological and how it manifests in a material form. This refusal ruptures the static notion of indigeneity that allows indigenous women's bodies to be deemed rapeable and extractable for the use of settlers. And the current representation around indigenous people in climate change debates are only framed within them as vulnerable and resilient, which allows for colonial intervention, which is the external impact decay, not solved for because the myth of the vanishing Indian is continued by this form of research. And the alternative, the idea to vote negative, to reject the one he sees, to reject the breaking down of indigenous people are deemed static, which is inherently violent because it's how settlers justifies its violence. The example I give is how Inuit hunting practices are tied to land and culture being ended by settler society because, well, you gotta have some trade routes. This logic is why questions of land and sovereignty and genocide are uniquely tied together, and why their sextant evidence misses the mark on the question why the alternative would just necessarily reproduce settlers. And that's the Simpson and Coulthard evidence. Look, the ballot is simply framed as if you think the ass mode of refusal and the praxis of refusal is one that can be used to challenge settlerism and anti-blackness, and you can vote affirmative because anything else is complicit in settlerism and anti-blackness. Now, the top level answer to the Warren extension, Jesse sure as hell didn't concede that. She said it's not a question of weighing ontology or impacts, but about their theory of violence and their inability to solve for it. There also was the argument about there needs to be a risk of 100% risk of a link. We're going to win out how the refusal is a methodological practice. It was one that can rupture anti-blackness and settlers, and the Tuck and Yang evidence is much better than they give it credit for. It talks about how academics and research are reproducing these kind of colonial discourses, which informs how we understand ontological investigation. Only we can reorient the way the academy continues to situate these research practices and rupture them by a refusal and a turning of the resources that was done above. Now, the top level answer to all their links is all the internal links to all their impacts and arguments are about recognition. Refusal rupture this because it doesn't require a colonial recognition from the state, but instead refuses it. This shifts the focus on how the state can help, and instead it locates the analysis how the state commits settler and anti-black violence. Tuck and Yang indicate the key. This is key for the ability for anything to be done in the world, because research is what informs the people in the academy writ large. They have a good explanation of everything, but the theory arguments they go for are not links to king evidence. I'm going to do that in a little bit, but they don't have an answer to the sovereignty link. I'm going to do here Sexton forces native to honor genocide by interpolating all discussions of land as being colonial. Their spin is not good enough. The evidence is very clear that he wouldn't necessarily reject all forms of sovereignty and relationality because they would reform anti-blackness. This misrepresents native studies and indigenous cultural relationship to territory and makes any form of research and refusal impossible because land is defining characteristic of indigeneity. Remember, Hunt says to fit this process of colonialism in North America involved representational strategies that transformed indigenous people in their lands conceptually, materially to facilitate their displacement and to render them less than human, which means we have an internal link to access how they actually come to understand this world. Yes, it is about the actual theft of land and necessitates a heuristic for indigenous people to coalesce around to separate themselves from the settlers. This is also an incoherency argument. I don't think they have to grapple with. That's why we read the piece of data evidence. I don't know more is not a coherent strategy for how sovereignty return works. They are blowing up pipelines, not mutable. They are not understood by settler civil society, which is a mode of how refusal functions. Of the permutation is going to be a really easy place to put this. Serial Mara evidence is where I'm going to start this week. It's going to win this around and proves a reason why the permutation is legit and a good practice. But look, that all the evidence is about how colonial recognition functions. It is a reading of Fanon, just not the one that you're talking about. Fanon affirmed himself as human. The last bit of black skin and white mask, he says something along the lines of, I will use the full weight of my humanity if a white man challenges. This is the methodological practice of refusal that we're talking about. Evidence is a better reading of Fanon, which is the key internally to all of their arguments. Wilderson evidence. This was not answered in the two in our Wilderson. Our evidence is one is how refusal is one that shifts the demands upon settler society, and instead of look at how you can help us, instead it ruptures the research was the key internal link to how coherency of settler civil society functions in the academy that helps structure it. Is that overview analysis about Tuck and Yang. You should put the red back in red, white, and black. It says that it structures everything, but this is untrue. It's why we read the fucking intro of the book. Wilderson explains how we demand to give Turtle Island back in life, give Turtle Island back and life itself back to the slave. This is what dismantles, which answers any of their structuring claims, which takes out the ability to solve the permutation axis is incoherency better than the alternative, which means the threshold for a libidinal investment framing is much lower for us. The permutation is neither a framing of an inclusion or exclusion, but a reframing of the way that redresses operates. This is important because at the most fundamental level, anti-blackness is settler clones and have theories of violence that operate to form the broader political economy. The permutation is the only way to reframe redress operates in terms of how these systems are analyzed, which is why Chaz has spent so much time on the King debate and the one here to prove their theory of violence is wrong. We don't misread Wilderson because their evidence assumes settler notions of sovereignty, like giving the land back writ large, but we refuse that. Our longer piece of Wilderson evidence indicates that for the establishment of Man Turtle Island is an incoherent demand upon civil society, like the black woman yelling at Columbia. Permutation do both means that we refuse the extractive research, dispossession, reconciliation, and refuse freedom as per Wilderson evidence. We do these things in evidence or refusal, climate change, and a red vanishing, all of which the whole is not able to solve. How can they claim to solve the app when they are impact turning some of their link arguments? That's also why it's not us moving towards them. It says that their theory of violence is wrong. In the face of the affirmative, this uniquely resolves the subjectivity link because the rupture is the very mechanism by which subjectivity links. The piece of the King evidence is very indicative that Black studies is inarticulate when it comes to settler civil society. King is doing an analysis of how the James argument actually functions because it is a coherent, the combination of settlers and anti-blackness and how it actually functions. The clearing is something that needs to be understood, otherwise they risk reproducing settler colonialism. King is better on the question about how the permutation could function because it requires an analysis of both of them that they leave out.
I know some people like to have all the evidence that we've read in a single doc. Do any of you want that? Okay.
The artist is taking my swag. I'm wondering if I can come.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on real quick.
You getting in order?
Do you want to put it in order yourself, or do you want me to? Alright.
Wait, if you want a digital copy, we can send you one.
Oh, yeah, that's for later.
See, that boy about to make me labor.
Y'all think we got enough time for Darius to walk, find a cigarette, smoke a cigarette, and come back?
Yeah.
Cool.
Nico,
Yeah.
is the selection of quotes from the audience, is that in one of your screenshots? Or
I can send all the quotes that I'm quoting.
You want me to send you
where we
what?
identify what card they're from?
Yeah, they'll say what card they're from.
Thank you.
Yeah, Darius will send you the quotes he's reading in the 1 hour as well.
I'm literally just copying and pasting the quotes inside of this shit, like literally just placing them in the email thing, not in a separate doc. So, if you want to look at them, it's fine. If not, I don't care. I'm about to go find your cigarette. How long y'all think y'all want to be? So I can know.
Don't be a minute, Jared.
Well, I'm trying to see. I get lost. Alright, shit. You gonna come find me in like.
Where you gonna be?
I don't even know, man.
Can you just wait like a moment? I'm about to be done with getting these quotes.
I'm a nomad, man.
A nomad, Jesus. should be sent out, and they have like little demarcations about which quotes are corresponding to which links.
Is the app email?
Yeah, Jesse's should have.
Yeah, I sent it to you, Marky. And just I said it, Chris. Did you get it?
Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay.
Is it what's titled 1AR?
Huh?
I'm actually confused now. Is it what's titled 1AR?
Whoops. Delete that. I got the 1AC.
Okay, use your laptop charger, Marcus. Use your laptop charger?
Yeah.
go all the way back into the other building.
It's not that far.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've heard you though.
I'm gonna listen to it right now.
I can have some of these. Huh? Yeah. I don't get them.
Yeah. Well, I kind of threw it on accident.
Well, you love them colors, huh?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I thought it was something else.
So I don't care, but someone's probably gonna come here and tell you the decision time.
Oh, how's it?
It's like 3 minutes past the decision time based on the invite.
Okay.
Here, post decision time.
Yeah, I told you.
Everybody in?
Yeah.
I mean. Oh yeah, good. Thank you.
I think Mark
Marquise just submitted. We're just waiting on confirmation.
No one's trying to be Scott Harris or anything. I want to be the last one in, and I didn't judge him.
And yet your specter haunts this tournament. Thank you all.
All right. Congratulations to both teams. The winner on a 3-0 is the negative from Oklahoma.
I can start. I voted neg primarily on the ontology debate. I just think you all, at the end, are just substantially behind on Western metaphysics indebtedness to slaveness as the 0 point for violence, and they link the sort of metaphysical capacity of Western thought to be intrinsic to your formations in relationship to sovereignty and ultimately refusal in the academy. There's a lot of different components of this debate, but one place I want to speak to right off the bat is the role of the black matrix. I think that problematizes your strongest offense in the debate, which is the question of rapeability of Native women and the need to talk about that and forefront that in terms of our theoretical analysis. But OU is making a claim that especially with their sort of framing arguments about the libidinal economy, that there are slippages and excesses in the AF that actually don't even illuminate that scene of terror in its true gratuity and actually act in a sort of redemptive capacity that effaces the very violence to Native women and I guess ironically at the expense of black women's rapeability as this sort of 0 degree point of even a possibility for consent to be a thing. There's this sort of desire for reclamation within the affirmatives, a seemingly redress to that scene of violence that shows a sort of theoretical aphasia to a host of theoretical terrains of violence and the need to sort of move through incoherency as a way to deal with cognitive schemas that are ultimately parasitic to a multitude of populations, but through the sort of axiom of blackness, right? And not just solely the focus of necessarily black women, but the black matrix as a zone of non-commensability, even the ability for redemption, or if redemption would even be mapped onto those bodies, and a sort of selective highlighting of hyperrapeability and but not the unrapeable part shows a need for as they talk about equilibrium, disequilibrium, and equilibrium reestablished, right? And that is sort of the linearity or the sort of temporal makeup of the AF that's also indebted in a very interesting way to a ultimately parasitic constellation. I think that the permutation is just not an option given the robust extension of several links to multiple authors within your AF and how they have sort of, again, parasitic assumptions in relationship to sovereignty, in relationship to what refusal would actually do, and it's just a lot of those slippages, and you all don't really push back on that enough to me, and like sort of characterize your AF as, you know, I think you need to be talking about, to be honest, the climate portions of your AF, the role that reorientation of research has toward mobilizing communities to fight the modern Anthropocene and the particularities of one's social location in relationship to you know, where they're at in the world and the need to survive within that context. But that is sort of left to the wayside. When I reach you all's evidence, I don't know how to match up this research or reorientation to the politics of things like I don't know more or any of these like sort of these like micro political factions that you mentioned. And I really don't understand like how the AF really correlates with the Cortland like blockages stuff, because it seems to be like indebted to like sort of economic stoppage and like the sort of process of like accumulation that is occurring and the need to like just have sort of immediate confrontation. But I don't think you rise the refusal question to that level and just sort of correlate those themes for me. And it just seems like a lot of disjunctures that I have to deal with. So I think, and another big problem is just no response to libidinal economy. Once they're given that means that literally pathology of blackness, that you all have an overindulgence in the black imagio as the phobogenic object, which means any instance in which I see a flinch in relationship to the suffering of blackness and an incommensurability or unwillingness to start from that site of absolute dereliction to then illuminate your politics is a reason you should lose, because it shows ultimately that there's a little libidinal investment to essentially move away from blackness, even in the most sort of progressive lines of flight. They say they are inevitably lines that cohere themselves within the modern world and really don't move outside of it. I got some other stuff, and I think on the Tuck and Yang portion of the debate, I think that I talked about it, you know, rupturing the like sort of process of refusal and what that means. But I think also for you all, you should be talking about like you need to make more even if statements. Like, so even if we don't win the ontology metaphysics question, here's why our role of engagement, our focus on antagonism and relationships to their explanation of indigeneity has a lot of potential in this space in terms of research reorientation. There's a better understanding of settler colonialism, right? So even if they win this sort of king articulation of the way in which that violence goes down, it can only be illuminated through the processes and the robust concentration that you all have produced in the academy, which is a way more better method of incoherent refusal, right? Because you all started from a seemingly unrelated position about like sort of Christian theology, but then it developed into a sort of robust interrogation into some very nuanced portions of their affirmative. And I think at the level of performance, it has like a punch that you can speak toward. And like, this is how we should engage in these spaces through, some incoherent positions that actually are very illuminative to the messiness of the settler, anti-blackness and settler colonialism as co-constitutive grammars of suffering. I'll let other folks go since we're kind of going over time, but I'll send my notes to you all if you all have any other questions. And I think that answering the libidinal economy, dealing with the black matrix early on, then I think you're in the game. Because I think that, Jasmine, I really like the move you make in the 1AR about the need to deal with rapeability, and that is essential, and that they're sort of facing that process. But I think you need to then tie the discussion of black women within that and talk about, like, hey, we're operating from that same locus. At the end of the day, that the question of consent, it should always be an option. And the fact that is structurally denied to black women is part and parcel of settler colonial logics. And that process of refusal, even outside of the academy, has a necessary component to the lives of women in question, and that should be forefronted, and it's sort of a priori before anything else. And I think a sort of situatedness of that sort of scene of violence from the theoretical abstraction could go a long way. But that's it.
The guy on the end voted negative. I'll keep this short and sweet because I want to get back for the reading. Strategically, I think that your approach coming into the debate was right on. Execution-wise, it fell apart a little bit, particularly in the 2AC. I think you missed the boat on a couple of link arguments that were advanced. The 1AR was a valiant attempt at recovery. I thought it was the best affirmative speech in the debate, so kudos to you, Jazzy. But I think that a couple highlights here. First of all is, I hate this, but they go for this argument on the permutation that we made you move. Okay, and there's just no pushback on that question. Theoretically, I think that that's asinine, right? They could stand up with a counter plan to do asteroid defense, and if you permute that, then you have moved from your 1AC position. I think that you need to re-articulate this as a test of the competition of their argument rather than kind of a repositioning of the 2AC. I think that you allowed the negative to tell you what your AF was about too much in this debate, and going back through kind of the quotations that they're pulling out of your evidence, I disagree with almost every one of these when read in its original context, but that's not in any affirmative speech, and so I have to take their kind of characterization of a lot of the, as they say, the libidinal investments of the AF that they have drawn from your unhighlighted pieces of evidence, and I think that you just need to have a moment in this debate where you're like, look, our AF is not that everything Audra Simpson has written is awesome. Our AF is this advocacy, and the fact that you are able to draw out some points of clash with unhighlighted pieces of our evidence does not mean that you should reject our strategy in toto. The short and sweet version is I think that they're ahead on meta-ethics. I think they're ahead on this permutation theory discussion, and that kind of short circuits your best kind of line of offense. I think that there were a couple of missed AF opportunities, particularly I think that not only did you need to answer the racial rape argument earlier, but that this is also perhaps an opportunity for pushback in the cross-ex when they kind of initiate this discussion of consent, and it's like, what is the alternative if refusal of consent is not an option. And so I thought that that was a missed opportunity for the AF. I think that the AF also needs to push back on this equilibrium, disequilibrium, equilibrium narrative arc story. I don't think that that is descriptive of the AF. Doesn't your kind of vulnerability, resistance, resilience dichotomy argument that you forward in the 1AC kind of answer that? I think that this is more akin to kind of like what Simpson characterizes as life lived in the face of certain political or cultural death, which is more akin to kind of like social life in the face of social death, rather than after our AF everything is gravy and it ends with a happy kind of restoration to equilibrium kind of thing. I will leave it at that. Y'all can email me more questions while I quickly talk.
My decision is similar, probably like articulated in a less intelligent way, but I think they're winning the sort of meta-ethics argument, sort of supercharges their link arguments for why your sort of affirmation of humanity becomes ultimately parasitic on blackness. I do think like there's not enough weighing of the affirmative as a dissad to the alternative, or what sort of is lost by ignoring whatever the method of the 1AC is. I think it's sort of left at the you leave settler colonialism intact, but I don't really get an articulation beyond that. I think the sort of violence against indigenous women is a good pivot, but as they said, that not answering the black matrix argument sort of becomes difficult in order to win that, because the way in which your sort of affirmation of consent sort of ignores the position black women are put in. The permutation, I also think that isn't flushed out beyond like Fanon affirmed as humanity, therefore the 1AC is a good idea. I don't think that responds to the sort of ontological positioning of blackness that, even if that's true of Fanon, I don't know why that is true of the 1AC, or like how that sort of method is incoherent to civil society. I think they're winning why you're a mode of recognition that is an investment into civil society and sort of replicates anti-blackness. I also don't understand why the alternative doesn't resolve the affirmative. Is just sort of, so that just makes it so that it's like it's a question of winning a singular link, makes it so that I vote negative.
Yeah, that's one area where the 2AR needs to be a little bit better, is answering the bottom of the 2NR, where he talks about how the alt solves the libidinal investments that makes the AF's impacts possible in the first place. I don't think that the 2NR was super deep on this question, but at least there's a gesture towards our impacts are inclusive of theirs, or control kind of a filter level question.
If you're done with your notes, or if you're not done, if you're done with your notes, that's fine. But if you're not done, could maybe one of y'all elaborate on how we could pivot the alternative as sort of a pick, right? Saying that or not even a pick, or that we're able to solve a majority of the 1AC we solve for some sort of like native spirituality that's necessary, but their forms of spirituality reinvest hope in the political. If that makes sense?
I think that you are better off staying where you were in this debate by saying that they're irreconcilable. I think the closer that you move to trying to include all of their shit, the more you're going to undercut their links and link creams.
All right, I was just trying to make sure that we heard that from another judge.
I think painting it as an even if question, like we think this metaphysical ontological question should be able to win us the round. But if it doesn't, this question of research and decolonization, we have radical inroads into how they missed the boat, essentially on how, missed the boat, that's ironic, but on the sort of role of enslavement and settler colonialism, and that there needs to be a sort of reorientation how we understand logics of sovereignty, genocide, and dereliction. Right, and that has an importance at an epistemic level, even outside of its like ontological formations. Right.
Quick thing, Jeff, about the 1AR. So like for all, obviously, it's kind of impossible to 1AR to answer like all of the here's what your line says.
Yeah.
Like,
I think strategic grouping there and just being like they don't get to tell us what the AF is about. Yeah. That all of these recontextualizations are from unhighlighted pieces of our evidence.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I was just trying to ask because like at the top of the 1AR when I'm like answering like the Warren type stuff, where I'm like, look, all the lines they're reading from are irrelevant because like our link turn, the stuff they're reading from doesn't assume like the solvency mechanism of the AF. Like, was that like a valiant effort to try to group those things and do what I could? Or?
Yes, but a little bit more responsive to the way that they have packaged the links. In other words, you're like, it doesn't assume the AF. You need to say, look, the lines that they're drawing out about action, or like the line that's like, this is not to say that like we should delay climate action. That's like saying that your advocacy is not mutually exclusive with some other shit that would be their link, right? And so, like I get that you say their evidence doesn't assume the F. I need you to push back in the context of they've advanced 3 different link arguments where they say you are oriented towards world making, you are oriented towards this narrative, equilibrium, disequilibrium, and so it's not enough to just say that's not our app. You need to engage a little bit more with the specifics of what they're trying to try out there.
I think K and psychoanalysis, as soon as you hear like libidinal economy, just talking about like the overindulgence in language and speech as the ultimate mode of communication has like a unique indebtedness to like Western thought. Just going all in about like, that's potentially like pathology, right? Especially since you're talking about like academic discourses. And,
other 1AR things, Marquise Calino. Just like general things that.
Yeah, I know.
I think Jeff already said this, but with the extension of the sort of violence against indigenous women, comparing that to the black matrix, because I feel like not weighing it against that argument gives it too much.
Yeah, I tried to use all the king stuff to sort of just like get inroads to all of that. Like, was that the right move, kind of, or just like and just apply that more to like the relationality of indigenous women?
Yes, but a little bit more on the question of what I was talking about, the consent question. They're kind of like, you assume that this is possible for somebody that has never been given the option to make a choice, and I think you just need to say, look, there's a difference between being right about your theory of violence and whether or not that can resolve anything. And so I thought the 2AR kind of started to get there. Like you might be right about your ontological description of the world, but does the alt resolve any of those things? I think that's a good place to be, right? It may be worth taking the reverse Pascal's wager that God is not a racist, right? Because they don't have any opportunity to resolve that. They just one that they are an accurate description of the way.
Those are really good debate. Awesome.
Thanks.